This tutorial will cover some basic interactions in Unity, including health and damage, collecting something like coins, and a key unlocking a locked door. So the first thing I've done is I've imported the character asset pack from the assets menu, import package, characters. And I've already imported mine. So I have here the standard assets folder, and inside of that there's the characters folder. And we're going to be working with the regular first person character controller today. I'm just going to use the rigid body FPS controller prefab. And so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to make some ground in my scene so that the player has something to walk on, just to make it easier to test things. So I'm going to make a plane, and then I'm going to drag in the rigid body FPS controller. And by default, when you drag it in, it actually snaps itself so that it's sort of stuck into the ground. So you want to go ahead and pull it up out of the ground is the first thing you do. Otherwise, when you hit play, you won't actually be able to walk around. I'm also going to scale up the ground plane a little bit so we have a little bit more room. And now that we have the FPS controller in the scene, it has its own camera. So I'm going to get rid of the main camera that comes into the scene by default. So if I just hit play right now, I can actually just walk around as this first person character, and I can walk off the edge and fall forever. So now let's add some interactions to this scene. The first one I'm going to do is I'm going to create something to collect. So in my main assets folder down here in the project window, I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call this materials. And the reason I'm creating this folder is just to help keep things organized. But inside of my materials folder, I'm going to create a couple of materials just so that everything in the scene isn't white. It makes it a little bit hard to see what we're working with. So I'm going to first create a material called ground, which will be a brownish color. And here I'm selecting the color from the inspector window. So I'll choose a brownish color, drag it onto my ground plane. So I just take the material from the folder and drag it and release on the ground plane. I'm also going to turn down the smoothness so that it's not so shiny. And I think I'm going to make this a little darker. Next, I'm going to make a material for my collectible object, which is going to be a coin. So I'm just going to name this coin. This is the material I'm going to use for the coin objects once I make one. And I'm going to make these a yellowish gold color. And I'll leave these shiny. So I'll leave it with smoothness, and I'll even turn up the metallic a little bit. And here you can see a preview of your material. And so now I want to create a game object for my coin. So I'll create 3D cylinder. And so now I have a cylinder. And if we scale this down, I'm just going to scale on the y-axis by grabbing this green block to scale down the y-axis. And if you ever are like too far away from your object or it's not in view, you can either, with the object selected, you can hit F, or if you're having trouble getting it selected in the scene, you can also double click from the hierarchy and bring it into focus that way. So here I have a flattened cylinder, and I'm just going to drag my gold coin material onto it, and let's rotate it so that it sort of actually looks like a coin. And if you hold Control while you're rotating, it'll snap so you can get it on a perfect 90 degrees. And let's move this a little ways from the player. All right, so now I have a coin object, and it's gold with its material. So now I need to script the interaction to make it so that I can collect the coin. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to first make a new folder for my scripts. Again, this is to keep my project folders organized. So I'll call this folder scripts, and inside of there I'm going to create a new C# script. And I'm going to call this C# script player. And this script is actually going to go on the player controller, not on the coin. So there's two ways to approach this problem. You could either make a coin script, which you would attach to the coin, or you can make a player script, which you attach to the player. And depending on which one you choose, you're checking for colliding with the other object. So if I made a coin script and put it on my coin object, then I would want to check if I collided with the player. But since I made this a player script, I'm going to attach it to my player object, and I'm going to check if I collide with a coin. The reason I've chosen to do this in a player script is because I'm going to actually be checking a few different things. First, I'm going to be checking for the coin so that I can collect it, and then a little bit later, I'm also going to check to see if I've collided with a damage trap. So I'll take this player script and just drag it down here in this area where it says add component, and it will add that player script to your player game object. Make sure you have your player game object selected when you do this. Now I'm going to open up this player script, and it's going to, mine is set to default open up in Mono Develop. You can also open it with Visual Studio if you prefer. Actually, in the latest version of Unity, it will default to use Visual Studio. And if it tries to tell you to activate a license for Visual Studio, you can just create a Microsoft account. And you don't have to purchase a license, you just have to validate it with a Microsoft account. So I'm going to use Mono Develop because that's what I have set up on this computer, but this will be the same no matter what you're using. So if your window looks a little bit different, that's okay. So again, this script is a player script. It is attached to my player game object. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if I've collided with the coin. Now, by default, when you create a new script in Unity, it has a start function and an update function. And update runs on every frame. That's what it says here in this comment, called once per frame. And start runs once at the very beginning when this object first comes into existence. So for what I'm doing right now, I don't need either of these functions, but I'm going to leave them here in case we need them for something later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a third function here called Ontriggerenter. And just like update and start, this is a function that is called automatically by Unity. So I could make a new function here. I could make my own function. This space down here is where I could create new functions that do different things. But if you want to use a function that Unity calls automatically, you have to make sure it's spelled correctly and has the correct capitalization. So Ontriggerenter has a capital O, a capital T, and a capital E, and it's very important that it is spelled correctly. Otherwise, Unity won't be able to call this function for you. This function is called whenever this object collides with another object that is marked as trigger. And I will show you in a moment how to mark it as trigger. So this is going to be called anytime this object collides with something marked as trigger. And so in my script, what I want to do is I want to check if this thing that I collided with is the coin. And the way that we're going to do that is with a tag. So I'm going to say if, oh, I forgot one thing actually. The Ontriggerenter function takes a variable as a collider, and you can name it whatever you want, but I'm going to call it other because that's just kind of a normal convention to use in Unity. So this function takes a collider value so that we can access that collider and query things about it. So now I can check if this other object that I've collided with, which I've called other, and I'm going to check its tag. And we haven't made a tag for it yet, so I could put whatever I want here, but I'm going to call it coin because that's what I plan on using to tag my object. So if other.tag equals is how we compare in C#. So a single equal sign is to set a value, a double equal sign lets us compare two values. So if other.tag equals coin, then just to test this out and get things set up, all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to destroy that other object. So I'm going to destroy other.gameObject. And this is going to destroy the coin when I collide with it. This will just be a quick and easy way for us to tell that we've collided with the coin. So now I'm going to save this script, and I'm going to go back into my scene, and the first thing I want to do is tag my coin. So this is my coin game object. Over here in the inspector, in this top section here, we have a tag drop-down menu. By default, things are tagged as untagged. So what I want to do is tag it as coin. And to do that, I need to add a new tag. And if I hit add new tag, it takes me to this menu, and I can hit this little plus button here to add a new tag called coin. Be sure to spell it the same way in your tag list as you have spelled it in your script. So now I've added this new tag, but it didn't actually apply to my coin. So I need to go back to my coin, and from this drop down, choose the tag coin. The other thing that I need to do is mark this as a trigger, which is part of the collider object. So the collider component here on my coin, my collider component has this is trigger option. And if I check this box, now it is marked as a trigger, which means that it will detect collision, but it won't stop me from walking through the object. So I can now walk through the object, but it will detect when I have collided with it. So now I'm going to hit play. And I can just walk up to the coin, and I can see the coin has now disappeared. The coin is gone, and so that means my script worked. The next thing we probably want to do is keep track of how many of these coins we've collected. So I'm going to go back to my script, and at the top of my player script, I'm going to set a variable, and I'm going to make this a public variable. The difference between a public variable and a private variable, a public variable can be accessed outside of this script. It will let me access it from another script. It will also let me change it or look at it in the inspector view in my scene. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. So I'm going to make a public int. An int is an integer or a whole number, and I'm going to call this coins collected. You can call it whatever you want, but make sure that it has no spaces. And I'm going to set a starting value for that as 0. When we first start the game, we have not collected any coins. So now, in my if statement, before I destroy the other game object, I'm going to do coins collected plus plus. You could also do coins collected equals coins collected plus 1. These do the same thing, but just for shorter notation, I'm going to do plus plus, which says whatever this value is, add 1 to it. And now, I'm going to go to my game window, and I'm going to turn off maximize on play. That way my window will stay small, and I can look at things in the inspector. So if I select my player here, I can see my coins collected value is 0, and if I hit play, I can watch that value when it changes. So when I walk up to my coin, that coins collected value down here has changed to 1. Now I probably don't want just one coin in my scene, I probably want multiple coins. And when you're dealing with multiple versions of the same object or multiple instances of the same object, you want to create a prefab. So this will make it so that all instances of my coin have the exact same things on them. So if I at some point go back and add an animation or a particle effect, or if I change the material, or if I add a script to this, if I change one of them, I can apply that change to all of them. So to make it a prefab, in my assets folder, I'll create a new folder called prefabs. And then in my prefabs folder, you can drag something from your scene into your prefabs folder to create a new prefab, but it's going to use whatever name the object is currently called in your scene. So I'm going to change this to be named coin. And now I'm going to drag it into my prefabs folder. And you'll notice when you do that, it turns the text in the hierarchy blue. So now this is a prefab object. So if I make changes to one of them and then I hit apply, it will make changes to all of them. And just to quickly see that in action, I'm going to use Control D, which is the hotkey to duplicate. And I'm going to make several of these. And I'm going to go, just so you can see how this works, I'm just going to give it a different material. And then if I select this prefab, so I've given it the ground material, if I hit apply, now all of my coins have that change. And so this makes it a lot quicker when you're making changes later on. So I'm going to turn this, actually here, I'll do this one this time. Turn this back to gold, hit apply, and now all of them are using that gold material. So now I have my coins set up and I can collide with my coin and collect them. And now I'm going to make the next interaction, which is going to be damage. So let's make a new game object. I'm going to use a cube. So this is going to be sort of representing a trap on the ground. And I'll make a new material called trap. And I'm going to make this red so that it looks dangerous. And just like we did before, we're going to check the box for is trigger on this object so that I can walk through it, but it will detect my collision with it. And I'm going to add a new tag called trap. And just like before, it does not automatically apply, so we have to go back to our trap object and apply that tag. And I'm going to make it a prefab. So I'll first name this as trap and drag it into my prefabs folder to create a trap prefab. Then in my script, I'm going to add, in my Ontriggerenter, I'm going to add another if statement to check another condition. So now I'm going to check if other.tag is trap with a capital T. Make sure it's spelled the same as when you made the tag for it. And this time I'm not going to destroy it. Instead of destroying it, I'm actually going to have the trap stay there. That way I could step on the trap again. Generally, traps, for the most part, they don't go away when you step on them. So that way you can take damage the next time you step on it. But what I do need to do is make a health variable. So I'm going to make a public int. I'm going to call this one health. And I'm going to start with it equals 100. So my starting value for my health is 100. Then in my if statement, if I collide with the trap, what I want to do is health equals health minus 10. So my health will go down by 10 every time I step on the trap. Now I'll save that script and we can test it out. So first I'll click on my character controller so I can see here's my health is 100. And if I hit play, if I find my trap, if I step on it, now it's down to 90. You can see down here in the corner, down to 90. If I step on it again, it's 80, 70, 60. And I can still pick up my coins. So there I have 1 coin, 2 coins, 3 coins, and 4 coins. So let's make it so that if our health reaches 0, we restart the level. That way, and I'll put some more traps around my scene. And that way, once my player runs out of health, they'll lose and they'll have to start over again. So back in my script, if they step on the trap, their health goes down by 10. And now I'm going to say if health is, I'm going to do less than or equal to 0 because it's possible, depending on how we're losing health, their health could at some point be, if say they got down to 5 health somehow and then we subtract 10, they would be at -5. So we want to check if it's ever less than or equal to 0. And if it is less than or equal to 0, we want to restart the level. So to restart the level, we need to use a built-in tool in Unity called Scene Manager. So we're going to do using Unity engine dot scene management. This, by adding this at the top, this will allow us to add functions that interact with how the scenes work. So we can change what scene we're playing or things like that. So now back in my if statement. If our health is less than or equal to 0, I'm going to do scene manager dot load scene, and here we give it either a string name or a build index, and I'm going to use a build index, and so I'm going to say 0. So this is going to load the scene with build index 0, and I'll save the script and then I'll show you where that number comes from. So in your file build settings, here is where you have your full list of scenes, and if you just started with the scene that Unity created for you, that would be, it's by default it's called sample scene. Maybe you made your own scene, but you can always hit this add open scenes button to make sure whatever scene you're working in is in this list. And here's the build index over here. So the build index starts at 0, the next scene would be 1, 2, 3, etc. So now, if this works, we should be able to, if we die, we restart the scene. So I'll walk around and collide with the traps. I've collected all the coins. And once I get to 0 health, then it restarts. And you'll notice the lighting changes when this happens. This is because we're right now using default Unity lighting, so it's automatically trying to bake the lighting for us. It doesn't really matter. This will be solved in the build once you set up the lighting yourself. So now we have the scene reloading when we reach our health equals 0. And the next thing we want to do is have a way to bring our health back up. So let's make sort of a health potion type object. So I'm going to make one more material. Called health. And let's make this one green. Green is good. And then we need an object for this. So I'm going to use a sphere this time. So I'll use a sphere for our health potions, drag that health material onto it, and let's just scale it down a little bit. And now, just like we've done with the 2 previous interactions, first thing we want to do, set this as isTrigger, give it a new tag called health, select the object again to actually apply the tag to it, then we'll make it a prefab, and make sure you name it before you make it a prefab. Drag it into your prefabs folder, and now it's a prefab. And then we'll go back to our script and add another if statement. If other.tag is health, then we will do health equals health plus 10. And since this is a health potion, it's probably a one-time use object, so we probably want to also destroy other.gameObject so that we can't continue collecting more health. One other thing is we want to make sure that our health is not above 100. And there's 2 ways we could do this. We could either, after we collect the health potion, we could check if our health is greater than 100. Or if we don't want them to pick up the health, if their health is greater than 100, we could do that before we actually collect the health potion. So I'm going to do it in that order. So I'm going to say if health is, let's say, if health is greater than or equal to 100, sorry, if health is less than or equal to 100, and we'll put the curly brackets around these 2 items. So if health is less than or equal to 100, then we will allow them to pick up the health potion. Now, if say their health was at 98, and we still want them to be able to pick up the health potion, but at this point, their health would be greater than 100. So we'll add another if statement here. If health is greater than 100, then we will set their health to 100. So health equals 100. So these two conditions are set up to make sure. The first one is making sure that they can't collect the health potion if their health is already at 100. Make sure they don't go over 100. Then if they're at like 98, then we can still collect the health potion. But if it pushes us over 100, we'll set it back down to 100. So now that we have all of that set up, now we can check and see if it's working. Let's make a couple more of these. Now if I first walk up to my health potion, and if I collide with, oops. Okay. So this should not be less than or equal to 100. This should be just strictly less than 100. Checking less than or equal to means that if it is equal to 100, it will still do this. So let's try that again. All right, so now I have 100 health, so I can't collect this, and I'm just gonna select my player controller so we can see our health. So I can't collect this because I have 100 health. So now I'll step on the trap. Now if I go back and run into the health potion, now I have collected it and I'm back up to 100 health. And now I can't collect this one, but if I step on the trap, go down to 90 and 80, 70, now if I pick up, then I'm at 80 again, and then I'm at 90 again. So that works. All right, so let's do one more interaction, and I'm a little bit running out of space, so I'm gonna make my ground plane a little bigger. And I'm going to make a door. So I want to make a door that the player can walk through. And so first, a door is not really all that useful unless you have some walls. So let's make some walls. So I'm just going to use cubes, and I'm going to scale them until they are the size of walls. And I'm going to Control D to duplicate. So I have 2 wall chunks, and then in between these is where I'm going to put the door. So now I'll make one more cube. And this is going to be my door object. And I'm going to make a new material for this. And we haven't used blue yet, so I'm going to use blue, and I'm going to call this door. And now for the door, we're going to have to do a couple of things. So for the door, we still want to have a box collider that is not a trigger. If we set this a trigger, then the player will actually be able to walk through. So we want to leave this not set to trigger, but we also want to be able to have a trigger on here to check if they're colliding with the door, because we want to be able to check to see if they have picked up a key. So actually first let's go ahead and make the key. So let's make another object. To distinguish it from everything else in the scene, I'm going to make it a capsule. So this will be our key. And since this is going to be sort of a collectible similar to the coin, I'm going to use this coin material on it. And so this one we do want to be a trigger. We want to just be able to walk through it and pick it up. We want to tag it as a key. And we want to make it a prefab. So I'm going to name it key and drag it into the prefabs folder. And so now when I pick up the key, I want to be able to walk through the door. And so I need a second box collider. And this one should be larger than the one that's on there by default. Oops. Oops. So I'm just dragging the Z axis to make it stick out a little bit like this. And I'm going to mark this larger collider. I'm going to check the box for is trigger. And now we're going to add a new tag called door and apply that tag to the door object. And just like everything else, let's name it and make it a prefab. So now I have two new things to check for in my script. So let's go after our health check. Let's check if other.tag is key. And I need a new variable to keep track of if I've collected the key or not. So I'm going to make another public. This time this is going to be a Boolean, or bool for short. So this is a Boolean value is true or false. So this is going to be whether or not I have the key. So I'm going to call this has key. And the default value for this is going to be false. Now if I collide with the key, I'm going to change that has key to true. And now I have one more check to make. Oh, and I'm also going to destroy the key. So destroy other.gameObject. All right, now I have one more check to make. If other.tag is door. Now, if I collide with the door, I don't necessarily want to open the door. I only want to open the door if I have the key. So I'm going to add another if statement here. If has key. Then just to make it easy, I'm going to destroy the door. And eventually we probably want to animate the door. But for now, I'm just going to destroy other.gameObject. And now we can test this out. All right, so if I walk up to the door and I can crash into it and it won't let me pass, it won't let me walk through. But if I come over here and I pick up this key, I did not actually tag the key. So don't forget to actually add your tag to the objects, not just adding it to the tag list. It does not automatically apply. So after you add it to the tag list, you do also need to apply it to that object. So try that one more time. All right, can't walk through the door. Let's go pick up the key. Okay, now I have the key. Now when I walk up to the door, it disappears. So now I can walk through that door. So that's how you create a simple key and locked door mechanic, as well as the collectible object, damage trap, and health pickups. In the next tutorial in this series, I will show how to animate the door when you are opening it, how to add a particle effect when you collect the coin and the health potion, and also how to add a damage meter at the top that shows how much damage you've taken. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and thanks for watching.